There are two formal ways of referring to China's currency. Renminbi is the official name, but when the Chinese people buy things, they say yuan. The yuan is a unit of the renminbi, like dimes, quarters and dollars here in the United States. Some tourists in Times Square find saying yuan rather easier than renminbi.
Renminbi. Renminbi.
Or something, I don't know. What's it say?
Renminbi. The renminbi.
Fantastic.
Good thing the Chinese also have another name for the yuan that's easier to say, kwai.
And I believe, coming originally from England as I do, that this gives me an advantage in understanding this, because British people buy things in pounds, but the currency around the world is known as sterling. See, it's the same thing. Yuan, renminbi, pound sterling.
When he was campaigning to win the White House, President Trump was very rude about China and its currency, accusing Beijing of planning to manipulate the renminbi in the future, deliberately devaluing it to make China's exports cheaper for overseas customers.
Like China is the grand master of devaluation.
Since then, President Xi and Trump have met in Mar-a-Lago in Florida. They got along famously, holding frank discussions on trade and the DPRK, which continues to focus minds in Beijing and Washington, D.C. President Trump is slated to visit Beijing very soon.
So now that he's moved out of Trump Tower and into the White House, what effect, if any, has President Trump had on the renminbi?
Yeah, it's highly indirect.
Analyst Dan Alpert says while the renminbi tracks a basket of currencies these days, the US dollar is a major component of that basket. So while for most of this year the renminbi has spiked against the dollar, in the same time frame it's declined quite sharply against the European single currency, for example.
They have the best of both worlds. They have an advantageous trading position with currencies that have risen against the dollar, which has weakened considerably since the Trump administration began. On the other hand, they're pretty much in the same boat as they always were with the dollar.
The dollar initially soared after Trump's 2016 election, but his failure to get legislation through the Congress, the Russia investigation, and an economic rebound in Europe have hit the once mighty greenback hard, sending it tumbling.
At the end of the day, China cannot abandon its mercantilistic structure. It has to continue to export. It has created so much overcapacity, and it doesn't really have the political environment in which it can constrain that capacity.
The view of many in the US is that the Belt and Road Initiative is partly an attempt to find additional markets outside the developed world, even though those same folks say Beijing still needs demand from developed countries to help it employ more and more people and reduce overcapacity.
In other words, what China needs more than anything is consumerism, pretty much wherever it can find it. And with the renminbi rising a little bit against the dollar, that helps with imports, but it's not really enough to stop Americans buying Chinese goods. And with the renminbi falling against the euro and other non-dollar currencies, well, that simply helps China sell its exports more.
China often talks about the renminbi having become a major global reserve currency like the dollar, the euro and the Swiss franc, a move that would give China more clout in politics as well as trade. Some media pundits hype this, saying Beijing's on a quest to displace the dollar. A slim majority on Wall Street see that as inevitable, given China's size and influence in the world. But not so fast, says Dan Alpert. It's most likely a long way off.
Yeah, I don't believe the Chinese currency will become the global reserve currency. That is something I think that is basically a media conceit and a conceit of a few less informed, non-economic focused analysts. The number of trades, both directions, that get resolved in Chinese currency is infinitesimally small in comparison to the dollar.
To become the world's dominant currency, he says China would have to be a major importer as well as an exporter over a sustained period. Renminbi would have to be freely traded on global exchanges.
I don't believe that free exchangeability and free convertibility of the RMB is in the offing, at least over the next decade, and probably within our lifetimes.
Of course, one sure way to test if the renminbi is ready for the world stage or not is to see if a New York taxi driver can even recognize a yuan note when offering one as payment for a fare.
Thank you very much. How much is that?
It's 6.30.
6.30. I'd like to pay in Chinese currency, if I may. Is that
Chinese
okay?
currency? No, we don't use Chinese currency. We use only dollars here.
But thank you.
Oh well, maybe it is a bit too soon after all.
Thanks very
One
much.
day, though, one day. John Terrett, CGTN, New York.